Okay. Hey, all right. People are here already. Very cool. Hi, hi. People are showing up. Good. Got a few minutes before we start. Okay. What? I'm down to one person. What happened to everybody else? Two. People are showing. Hello. Hello, person. Hello, Jordan. All right. Three people. Rock and roll. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. You know how it is. Couple minutes before we start here. All right. Good deal. Good deal. Hello, Mary. How are you? All right. Let's rock and roll, man. We keep getting. Oh, you have access to the ebook quizzes now. I'm good, Mary. I'm good. I wonder how many people have access to the ebook quizzes now. That's awesome. Well, Jordan, if enough people have access to the ebook quizzes, we might just be able to do that. That would be great. I'll find out before the end of this week. You've had access since day one. Then why did everyone else have so much trouble? Jordan, you have the magical power. It's all I can think of. You're magic, man. You are magical. I'm magical. We're all magical. Little magical unicorns. Which one is this? Which? Glinda. What? Glinda? This is Glinda. My wife named this one Glinda. And let's see here. What's this one? Um, Colin. And this is Colin. So, okay. All right. Okay, so you use the Revel link. Aren't they? No, they're for my wife. Every time she's not feeling well, I buy her a stuffed animal. It's a tradition. So she has a lot of stuffed animals. Um, what can I say? All right, so you use the Revel link. Okay, well I'll share that advice with people. I guess in a way, we're sharing that advice right now. Yeah, they are cute, aren't they, Mary? All right. Well, it's 1 o'clock. Oh yeah, and then of course we have plushy Hellboy here, so um, with the hand and everything. So all right, this is great humanities content, right? Okay. Anyway, welcome. It's 1 o'clock. Uh, Mary thinks that Hellboy is definitely the best. All right, rock and roll. Um, most of you, it looks like, I'm really glad you like the class, Jordan. Yeah, Hellboy will be on your test. No, I'm kidding. There's no test. It looks like most of you will probably be watching this later, but that's okay because we can do that. I will be recording a video also to cover some thoughts on chapter 1. This is all very, I know everything's really disorganized right now. We're all just doing the best we can, and I understand that you guys are doing the best you can. I'm doing the best I can. We're getting the hang of it. I don't usually teach online, so this is a thing, man. Anyway, but today I'm going to talk a little bit about chapter two. Um, as I've said before, the chapter reading is for your background knowledge and also for the quizzes that are associated with the ebook and which at least some people have access to through the Revel link. Um, I'm going to do some more investigating on that because I was under the impression that no one in class could access the quizzes, that they were getting the ebook, but not the quizzes. And now that I know that that's not the case, I'm going to do some investigating because if we can get those quizzes working, then man, we're off. We're off to the races. And if not, I have to make a bunch of quizzes and post them on Blackboard. But anyway, my lectures are on material that isn't directly covered by the textbook. The lectures are more an attempt to draw the material from the textbook into some kind of coherent picture. Because books like the humanities book and history books, they throw a lot of information at you, facts and figures, names and dates. They throw maps at you, but they're not often great at creating sort of a cohesive picture of what's going on. And that's what I want to do here. Part of the project of the humanities, of the study of the humanities, is to interpret our existence in this world, is to interpret the human condition. And we're going to try and frame a narrative of what's all these events. We're going to take them and we're going to kind of pull them together and try to understand them as a story, sort of what has happened to us, the human story. So that's what the lectures are mostly about. Now, just a little more class business on that. I'm going to try by the end of the week, if not that, then by Sunday, surely, to get the first essay assignment up. Remember that nothing is actually due until the end of the semester. I just want to put it up. I encourage you to finish it early, get the stuff as I put it up. But I understand. Yes, Jordan, very good question. The essays will draw primarily at least 80-90% from the lectures. So that's what I'll be that's what's happening there. Also, it looks like I have my eyes closed because I'm watching myself on the screen because I'm obsessed with myself. I'm a narcissist. Um, but not looking at the camera, so it looks like my eyes are closed. I can stare at the camera. Um, but anyway, sorry, I'm not sleeping. Anyway. But yeah, good question, Jordan. So okay. So what is the narrative then of Mesopotamia? Well, this is so hard without my whiteboard. I'm going to get one of those tiny little whiteboards you can write on, and I'm going to write on it, and I'm going to hold it up in front of the camera because that'll be cool. Anyway, what is the narrative of Mesopotamia? Mesopotamia, as the book tells you, comes from the Greek words between the rivers. And it's a region of what is modern day Iraq, which is something we call a cradle of civilization. That term is fraught with all sorts of culturally chauvinistic assumptions, but it's still a term that we use. It's still a phrase that we use. So I'm going to use it, but I want you to think about it in context. Now, a cradle, of course, is a place where we put babies because it's safe and nurturing. It's an environment where they can exist without a lot of threats. It's a place where they can do a little growing up. And a cradle of civilization is something similar. Humans have been around for a long time, about 2 million years. Homo sapiens have. But for most of that time, they were hunter gatherers, which means they roamed around in small groups and mostly just lived opportunistically off of small game, sometimes a little bit larger game, and what foods they could gather during their journeys. Thus, hunter gatherers. Hey, 7 people. All right. Anyway, hunting and gathering does not allow for a lot of opportunity to accumulate stuff because you have to carry everything with you all the time. Can't really go anywhere. In a hunter gatherer society, everyone is a hunter gatherer. Uh, that's just how it is. But once humans started to cultivate animals and plants for their own use, they could stop moving around looking for food. They didn't have to chase the food. They didn't have to go to where the food was. They could make the food be where they were. Now, what does this involve? Well, it involves figuring out which plants are good to eat, figuring out how to make them grow where you want them to grow instead of just wherever they're gonna grow, figuring out how to cultivate and harvest them. In other words, agriculture. They were able to breed cattle and domesticate those, and they were able to domesticate. It's a word that we don't hear a lot for plants, but technically it's the correct term. They were able to domesticate plants and sort of grow them in a place where they wanted the plants to be. Now, for a long time, anthropologists and archaeologists have referred to this as the beginning of civilization. That once you start doing agriculture, you are civilized. That is, as I said, a culturally chauvinistic assumption because it places various peoples in history who did not practice agriculture in that way as non-civilized. And that, I mean, that's an old way of thinking. As we know, when explorers from Europe came to uh, what we now call the Americas, they discovered people already living here. And most of those people were not practicing the kind of intensive agriculture that Europeans did. Um, but they had societies, complex, rich societies with their own laws and literature and customs. Um, but they weren't considered civilized. Well, that's a very silly distinction. But nonetheless, it is useful for us to distinguish between non-agricultural societies on one hand and agricultural societies on the other hand. Because with agriculture, a lot of things sort of come along with it, sort of follow on with agriculture. And not that those things are better, but just that they are interesting. And so we are interested in those things for the purposes of this class. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So rather than calling Mesopotamia a cradle of civilization, as it has traditionally been referred to, why don't we refer to it as a cradle of agriculture, which is more accurate? Okay, that's my little rant on cradle of civilization versus cradle of agriculture. All right. So, why was Mesopotamia a cradle of agriculture? Well, let's put it this way. I don't know how many of you grew up on a farm or near a farm or with relatives who might have been farmers, but this is Oklahoma. So I'm guessing statistically, at least a couple of you. I've got some farmers in my not too distant relation. Farming, of course, needs water, warm weather, um, and preferably flat, fertile soil, flat, fertile ground. Now, humans, it seems like, tried to get agriculture going at numerous points. The archaeological record tells us that there were plenty of hunter gatherer groups that had this idea to say, we walk around looking for food. Why don't we take some of the seeds and try to just plant them somewhere? and that way we'll know where the food is. They had this idea, but it wasn't until about 10,000 years ago when the climate shifted and it got warmer and wetter, and a lot of carbon dioxide was released into the air during this period. And what is carbon dioxide? Food for plants. What do plants eat? Carbon dioxide. Um, that agriculture became really feasible. The weather conditions turned in such a way, the climate changed in such a way as to make it easier to do agriculture. And if you had to guess, where would be the first places that humans would get agriculture going on a large scale? Well, you would guess it would be the places with the flattest land and the most fertile soil and the best weather and the best access to water. And lo and behold, Mesopotamia is one of those places. Especially in the lower part of it, which is, say, the southern part of it, closer to the Persian Gulf, the area between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers is relatively flat. It has access to water, which is, say, those rivers. It is warm. It doesn't really get a true winter there. Especially toward the seacoast, even the summers are relatively mild, so it's not too hot. Plenty of rainfall to help out additionally. And, um, it has a, um, like I said, flat ground, and the soil is fertile, not only because it's good soil anyway, but because the rivers would overflow their banks and would spill the silt, the fertile soil on the river bottoms over that flat land like a fertilizer. So this is perfect area to start agriculture. In fact, you can think of Mesopotamia as easy mode for agriculture. If you're a video game player, it's easy mode for agriculture. And that's what makes it a cradle of agriculture or a cradle of civilization, blah, blah, blah. Cradle of agriculture. Why? Because if you're going to do agriculture anywhere, that would be a perfect place for it. Of the people who are here, any questions so far? Yes. Yeah, Juan is like, I understand gamer logic. Cool. Okay. Any questions so far? No, feel free to jump in with questions in the chat, by the way, or comments. Talk about how much you love my beard, whatever. Just what have you. Just let me know you're alive. I like it. It's always fun. Okay, so cradle of agriculture, Mesopotamia, especially lower Mesopotamia. Okay. Were there other cradles of agriculture? No, Jeremiah, I don't think he has yet. I don't know. What? Huh? What? Oh, did you ever guess that question? Oh, yeah. Um, I did not give you an essay question yet. No, I'm going to try and put that up starting this week. And is it essentially the start of farming? Yes, basically. Mesopotamia and a few other areas. The cats are all, I guess they're upstairs sleeping. I don't know. They don't want to have any part of me today, I guess. Little monsters. Yes, essentially, Mesopotamia is the start of farming. Mesopotamia and a few other areas that are similarly cradles of agriculture. The Yellow River Valley in China, we see agriculture starting around the same time. The Nile River Valley in Egypt, the Indus River Valley in what would be modern day India. There are a number of places, these river valleys. Why river valleys? Well, again, water, relatively flat land, fertile land. And if there are river valleys sort of near, but not too near the equator, it's going to be warm. So in all of these places, agriculture, say farming, gets going earlier than anywhere else on the planet. So they have a head start. Everywhere else, people are still roaming around chasing the food. Or maybe they've gotten like a half step towards agriculture, which is to say they have figured out how to herd cattle, but haven't yet gone all the way to cultivating crops uh, on a very on a large scale. Okay, and we call that, by the way, pastoralism, ultimate nerd agriculture. There you go. Um, okay, so yes, agriculture makes us angry a little bit. Okay, so, haha. Um, where will? Oh, right. So, what are the things that come along with agriculture that we're so interested in for the purposes of this class? Well, all right. I said around 10,000 years ago, they started getting agriculture going in these areas. 10,000 years ago, more or less. So the process happens slowly over a large period of time, but the process that happens is that you develop a number of things along with agriculture. The first thing that you get is specialization. Now, I said on your hunting and gathering, people are, well, they're all hunter gatherers, right? Um, you have a tribe and it's not very large, and you travel around and you're all basically responsible for trying to get that caloric intake, get that food for the day. But under agriculture, every square mile of land can support more people than it takes to work the land. Get that bread, yes. Agriculture, even primitive agriculture, can support about 10 to 20 people per square mile of land cultivated. But anybody who's been on a farm knows that it doesn't take 10 to 20 people to work a square mile of land. You can do that with maybe 3 to 5 people. So, what are the other people going to do? Well, as it turns out, if some of the people are involved in food production and the rest of the people aren't, that remainder of the population can start doing other things and doing just those things. They can start specializing in skills. But what kind of skills do you need? Well, the first thing you need is this: people who can fight. Why do you need people who can fight? Well, as it turns out, if you have agriculture, you're getting a lot of food and you're storing that excess food, right? You're getting more food than you need, strictly speaking, and you're storing it all in one place. So rather than walking around and just trying to eat like every day is a new journey to find food, because you don't have anywhere to put the extra food. With agriculture, you can develop a backstock of it. But imagine that you are not an agriculturalist. Imagine that you're still a hunter gatherer, and you and your little tribe of hunter gatherers lives not far away from a bunch of these agriculture people, a bunch of these weirdo agriculture practicing people. They live right there in Mesopotamia, and you live just outside of it. You're in the Mesopotamian suburbs or something, whatever. You live just outside of Mesopotamia. And you know they have food. They have it like in a building, a big building where they keep all their grain. And you've been walking around trying to find food, and suddenly you think to yourself, what am I, a chump? Why would I walk around trying to find food when those yo-yos have grown the food for me and put it in the building? What are you going to do? You're going to go get that food, right? You're like, come on, guys, let's get their food. So one of the very first specialized skills that develops, sadly, right? This is a sad thing, but it's a very true thing. One of the very first specialized skills that develops with agriculture is professional soldiers, professional fighters, people who do nothing but train how to kill. which sucks, but that's how it goes because you got to protect your food, right? Got to wipe out those barbarians that just want to come in and steal our food, those uncivilized people. There you go. Uh, a guy who does history of warfare, anthropologist and historian Robert Keegan, who does history of warfare, has written that agriculture is also the beginning of war. That hunter-gatherer societies didn't really have a lot of reason to fight. They might sometimes have little skirmishes over territory, but they never really fought wars in the way that we understand them. They never really had warriors in the way that we understand them. Whereas agriculturalists do. They have people whose only job it is to carry a weapon and fight because they have to protect uh, that grain. Well, what else do you need? Well, if you're going to store your grain in a building, you need people who know how to build buildings, right? Okay, so we've got that. We got people who only learn how to make like clay bricks and build buildings out of clay. All right. And if you're going to have people whose only job it is to carry weapons and know how to fight, you got to have people who know how to make the weapons. Ah, crap. Right now we got builders and weapon makers, and we got soldiers. Well, what else? Farming requires a knowledge of the passage of time, of the passing of the seasons. You want to know when you're going to be able to plant. You want to know when to harvest and so forth. So now you need people who can watch the stars and calculate the calendar and things like that. Oh, wow. Right? We're getting complex up in here. We're getting very advanced. Astronomers, yes. And in particular, those astronomers, well, and astrology, astronomy, all the same thing back then. Those astronomers were priests, right? They thought that the stars were gods or spirits or living entities that moved through the heavens and told them when to do things, that controlled the destinies of humans. So you have this class of people whose job it is to study the heavens and tell the farmers what to do. They're basically in charge, right? They tell the farmers when to plant, when to harvest. Everybody else depends upon these people and their specialized knowledge. Of course, they're going to wind up in charge, right? Of course they are. These priests began to dominate society. The builders build not just buildings to put grain in, but walls. So you've got a central location where the grain is. And the farmers are out here in the farms, but they bring the grain into one place and they put it in the big grain buildings. And then to keep the barbarians away, you build walls around that area. But you've got all these people who aren't farmers. And they live where? Inside the walls, near the grain. Who lives there? The builders and the people who make the weapons, the blacksmiths and the priests, the astronomers. Um, okay, there you go. Who in this society would be considered the poor, and why couldn't they specialize to accumulate power? That's a great question. And it's a nice transition to my next point. So this is good. You helped me out there. What happens is society begins to develop stratification. It begins to develop classes, social classes. In hunter-gatherer society, we all have the same stuff. We carry our spear and our little bag with that cool rock I found yesterday, and maybe my little stone knife or whatever, and that's it. I don't have a whole bunch of stuff. But in the agricultural society, some people are poor. Who would be the poor? Well, on the one hand, the farmers are the poor. Not initially. In the very earliest stages of agricultural development, the farmers are farming. They're doing their best and they're sharing power, right? But as they start to develop the specialization of skills, let's say the farmer gets into a dispute with a bricklayer or something. Well, who knows who wins that one? But let's say the farmer gets into a dispute with a soldier. Well, I think we all know who wins there, right? The guy with the weapons and who spends his whole life learning how to use them. That guy wins. So the soldier is in charge, basically. He can tell everybody else what to do. But then come the priests, the ones who know how to make the farming more efficient by telling you when to plant. And it eventually develops that they're the ones in charge. The priests and the warriors sort of ally, and they run everything. So on the one hand, the farmers are kind of the poor because they are the menial labor that are enslaved by the priestly class and put out to work. The soldier wins, he gets a scoop of the farmer, so does the priest. Right, exactly. It really is a weird pyramid of power, and it is a pyramid. The priests and the soldiers have to control the farmers, and every time, here's a little thing. One of the bits of military jargon that exists to this day is the concept of something called a force multiplier. Let me type it in the chat. A force multiplier, which is to say that certain weapons and equipment. Let's say you have two people, one regular person, another regular person. In theory, they are evenly matched. But then you've got a guy who has a gun. And then this guy with the gun, they think of the gun makes him able to take on multiple people, right? It is a multiplier on his effectiveness. The weapons that the soldiers had were a force multiplier. And yes, the classes were in competition. The soldiers and the priests could try to oppress the farmers and make them give them the food. But you constantly see throughout the history of the world, and even in Mesopotamia, where they might overplay their hand and the farmers would rise up and destroy them. But then eventually it would circulate again, and a new group of soldiers would oppress the farmers again, right? And a lot of people don't want to risk themselves. They're not going to rise up. They're like, better that I go ahead and be in menial labor and work and give my food to the priests, and then they distribute it. Better I do that than risk my life trying to throw off these chains of oppression. That can happen. So it wasn't always a stable pyramid. Yeah, Hegel's dialectic, basically. Yeah. It wasn't always a stable pyramid of power, but it was the way of things that you get these Scable-esque situations where someone from the priestly class would rise sort of to the top and use the power of their knowledge of the stars. And also, remember, the people believed in their picture of how the universe worked, that these gods and spirits and monsters existed and ran everything. And they really believed that the priests were in touch with these things. So that's the other reason you don't want to piss off the priests, right? The priests are the ones that are helping you survive. If you're sick, you go to the priest and say, hey, I'm sick. Can you talk to the gods and do something about it? And they're like, we'll see. I'll pencil you in for Thursday or whatever. And they really believe this. So you don't want to rock the boat on that. So the priests have this power. So it develops into this. You've got this priestly class that's running everything. And at the head of it is what is sometimes called a priest king. I like to refer to it by its more technical name, an autocrat. Someone who is in charge by divine power, in charge of everything. And so it was a form of government, a form of government called autocracy. Yeah, like a supreme pope, basically, where the king, the secular power, and the divine power was all wrapped up in one. A single ruler who controlled everything by divine right. The autocrat was usually thought to be literally divine, to literally have the blood of gods in them, or if not that, then to be in a special relationship with the gods, to be able to communicate with them. Okay, so that's the kind of form of society that develops slowly. And you can see how it develops over the course of thousands of years of agriculture. You can see how it develops from what we call the material conditions, just the plain physical facts of how they live, sort of all conspire to yeah dictators yeah everybody belonged to the autocrat. There's no sense of the idea like, oh, they have to obey the law or anything like that. It was the autocrat is in charge, period. Everything is theirs by divine right. The people belong to them. They can do whatever they want, so on and so forth. Okay. But long about 3000, 3500 BCE, so about 5,000 years ago, the development that we are most interested in happens, and that is writing. Now, this is the big thing that had historians and anthropologists and archaeologists convinced that agriculture meant civilization. That's why they thought of agriculture and civilization as the same thing for so long. I don't like that. There are pre agricultural societies that are far more civilized in their behavior than agricultural societies are. Agricultural society can be brutal. After all, there's an autocrat, a dictator that's just in charge of everything. Agricultural society can be terrible in a lot of ways. If you're not at the top, it's not necessarily a great place to live. But the reason why they called it civilized is because they developed writing and they were able to talk about themselves. Now, how does writing develop? Does anyone want to take a guess at what the first thing writing is used for in an agricultural society, a very early agricultural society? What would be the first thing? Netflix, obviously. No, I'm kidding. Look at the first thing they get. Well, the first thing they used it for, writing records. Well, of the history of their agriculture, yeah, basically, they need to know how much food they have and where it is. Yeah, labeling. What do we got in here? How many cows do we have? How many bushels of grain do we have? That's the very first thing. Which times are best to farm? Yes, astronomical, astrological information. The Mesopotamians, by the way, the astrological system, if you read your horoscope or even know what sign you are, then you're still living with the history of Mesopotamian culture because they started that. Right. A lot of what comes to us through the Greeks, which is why we use the Greek names for things, Pisces and Capricorn and stuff. But that all goes back. The Greeks got it from the Mesopotamians. The Mesopotamians are the ones that came up with this. And they were the ones that were charting the stars and writing down the movements of the stars and writing down what they had in storage, what agricultural stuff they had in storage. And from there, it just developed. They could write about other things. You could write about all kinds of stuff. You could talk about what you believed. You could talk about your king, your government. You could talk about your people. You could write. You could write anything. As I said in the last class, people wrote letters of complaint to A. Nasser, the copper merchant, who was apparently quite corrupt, which just tickles me pink. I giggle every time I think of him. It just amuses me to no end. But yeah, so this is writing. Writing develops about 5,000 years ago. And that's the civilization part. Now, even though I think it's unfair to call these people civilized and the other people not, we're going to concentrate on the beginning of so-called civilization from the beginning of writing. Why would we concentrate on that in particular when we get to the beginning of writing? Well, the reason we concentrate on the beginning of writing is that it's a real pain in the butt to concentrate on stuff before that, right? We can make educated guesses about pre-writing societies based on what we know about modern day societies that don't have any writing, and there are still some. Uh, there are still modern day hunter gatherers, modern day um, pastoralist societies that have not developed writing. It's weird to think of that, right? But there are. Um, we can make educated guesses from the archaeological record and from what we know about still existing societies that don't have writing, but we can't ever know for sure what these societies thought or what they were like, not in total, because they didn't write anything down. 10,000 years ago, right around the beginning of agriculture, in modern day, what would be modern day Israel, there were a group of people called the Natufians. Let me type it in the chat so you can see what I'm saying. The the Natufian peoples. That's what we call them. We don't know what they called themselves. We know that they flourished for about 1,000 years and then died out. We know that they had trade, that their trade links stretched all the way from modern day Israel down to the Persian Gulf because they had jewelry that was made with shells that do not come from the Mediterranean, that do not come from their native waters, that come from the Persian Gulf. We know that they built houses uh, in little patterns around a communal center and that they farmed and that they lived as families in individual family dwellings. We know that early on in the Natufian society, when they buried their dead, they just dug a real shallow grave and tossed the person in there and buried them. But towards the end of Natufian society, they buried their dead much deeper and they buried them with tools and with jewelry and with fine clothing. Now, those things would have represented a significant amount of labor and wealth, and they were willing to take those valuable items and stick them in the ground with a dead person. Why did they do that? It must have been some kind of belief in something, some kind of belief in it, they had some kind of belief about what happens to you when you die, but we don't know what it is. And here's the part that I will not lie to you, keeps me up at night sometimes. Will it transform into creation with the way they bury people like that? Yes, yes, it did. We can chart the progress of the development of this tradition from our archaeological finds. Yes, Juan, very good question. Here's the part that legit keeps me up at night sometimes. We not only don't know why they did it, we will never and can never know why they did it because they didn't have writing and they never wrote anything down and now they are gone and we can't ask them and that is gone. That is just lost. The reason why we are interested in starting with the Mesopotamian societies and the Egyptian societies and so forth after they discover writing, laughing Socrates. After they, yeah, the reason we're interested in this is because that's the first time those people can speak to us in their own voices. We don't know what they're thinking prior to that. We can make some guesses as to what their lives are like, but that's all. But once they start writing things down, cries and yeah, oh my god, if I could invent time travel and go back and be like, why? I would, oh god, that would be, that's what I would do with time travel, right? Forget about killing baby Hitler. I want to go back and figure out why the Natufian people did that, right? And maybe like invest in Disney stock in 1950 something, you know. But I have needs. I have material needs. So, but other than that, go back to 1997 or 1998 and invest in Google. I was a grown man in 1998. I had money. I could have invested in Google. I didn't know what the hell it was. God, I wish I had. Anyway, I got a little off track. My point is, we start with Mesopotamian society around 5,000 years ago because that's where this is when they invented writing, and we can start looking at their not very cool looking comrade. Yeah, well, fair enough. Um, introduction to his art career. You know, the funny thing is, I have seen some of Hitler's paintings, and while he wasn't great at people, he was an excellent landscape painter and a good architectural draftsman. Um, so take it that way, you will. Um, I'm like, if that guy got rejected from art college, I sure as hell wouldn't get in. Anyway, I'm like, I can't paint like that. Anyway, point is, um, what was my point? Oh, right. That's when we can start seeing what they thought of themselves and how they developed their societies. So, under agriculture, you gradually develop cities, right? First of all, the first thing is you develop cities because, like I said, there's this place where you store all the grain, and then you have to build a wall around it, and then all the people who aren't farmers wind up living there, and next thing you know, you have this population center that is a city. So we get cities, we get walls, we get armies, we get the autocrat, we get astronomy, we get mathematics. You have to develop math to handle your stuff with the you have to develop math to do all your accounting and stuff. We get all kinds of stuff. Things start changing. Things start getting invented. And Mesopotamia is one of the early cradles of agriculture, cradles of quote unquote civilization, where this happens. So we're going to be looking at how Mesopotamia sort of develops and becomes a starting point for a lot of things that happen after it. Now, where is this going to take us? Well, ultimately, obviously, we live in the world. It's not even a primarily agricultural world anymore. Only a small percentage of people are involved in agriculture, but it's still fundamentally an agricultural world, right? We still need farmers to get our food course. We haven't grown past the point where we need to eat. Um, uh, I one of my relatives uh, once said, he was joking, I hope. He once said, I don't get my food from a farm, I go to the grocery store. um, I found that highly entertaining. Anyway, um, but all of this, we live in the legacy of what these Mesopotamian people did. They started a form of society that is still with us, living in cities. these urban centers that support the non-farmers. That starts there. I mean, heck, some of the stuff they came up with is still with us, not just astrology. Why do we use math based on 60 for time? Why are there 60 minutes in an hour and 60 seconds in a minute? And why does a circle have 360 degrees? Why? The Mesopotamians, the Sumerians used math with a base 60 rather than a base 10. And they first developed the math. So we know in Greek, I like that. They first developed the mathematics of circles. They didn't figure out pi, not yet. The Egyptians got close, and then the Greeks got it pretty much right. Um, but um, uh, but they first started to develop the math of circles, and they used a base 60. And so the fact that we have 60 minutes in an hour and 60 seconds in a minute is all the way back to the Mesopotamians. So they're still with us in that. Anyway, uh, the Mesopotamians sort of lay this foundation for what will come later. And over the course of the entire Bronze Age, which runs from about 3000 BCE to about 1000 BCE, so for about 2000 years, the most socially and technologically advanced and culturally advanced societies in the whole region, except for Egypt, and we'll talk about Egypt. Egypt's weird. Egypt's an exception to everything. Like every time I say something, I'm going to have to be like, except for Egypt. We'll just get to that. The most advanced societies, generally speaking, were in Mesopotamia as they sort of did their thing. After the Bronze Age ends, the inertia is going to shift westward to Greece. But for now, Mesopotamia is where it's at. And why? Why were they so energetic? Why were they coming up with stuff? Well, a lot of people argue it's because of cities, which of course only developed because of agriculture, right? So agriculture leads to putting all your stuff in one place, which leads to different social classes, which leads to building walls and warfare and specialization. And then that leads to inventing new stuff, because when you can devote your whole life to just one thing, you can get good at it. And when you invent new stuff, you develop new weapons, new technologies, new kinds of art. And there's this, and things start to move forward, things start to progress. And all that happens in the city, where you have all these people clumped together where they can exchange ideas easily. So, in a way, this development of agriculture leads to the development of cities, leads to everything else. And this is how we get going on our progress up. When you think about it, humans have been around for 2 million years. They were hunter gatherers until about 10,000 years ago. And then about 5,000 years ago, they start writing. And in the last 5,000 years, since we invented writing and cities and all that stuff, more has changed than in the last, than most of that 2 million years. So there's this rapidly, this curve that is getting very steep of our change. So that's why we're interested in. All right. Any questions so far? Agriculture, autocracy, how these things are related. I will post this video will obviously go up again. I'll post this video, but I'm also going to probably post. I might make up a little PowerPoint just to summarize main points and throw it up there too, just to help. But that's where we are now. No questions. All right. Well, listen, 9 people make it, and I'm so proud of you. So with autocracy, will this eventually lower the power curve of autocracy is going to stay that way for a while. Autocracy survives for a very long time because it's not an efficient form of government, but it's an attractive one. people who can use their power to sort of control the people at the top who can leverage the power that they have to control the people underneath them. I mean, that's obviously going to be a situation where a lot of people are going to try to do that if they can, because people suck. Not you, but like in general. Um, yeah, autocracy is going to be around for a while. Uh, don't overestimate your opinions. Going on Ethan. Yeah, I figured Ethan. I figured Ethan popped by. Yeah. Um, and thank you for coming. Whether or not you're in my class, I really appreciate it. Um, I hope that you guys are doing well and prospering, and that your classes are going good. Um, I know it's a crazy time. Yeah, people come to visit me. Um, so okay, uh, I'm gonna post more content. Like and subscribe. Isn't that what YouTubers say? Remember to like and subscribe. Whatever. I don't know, man. Um, Yeah, feel free anytime. I'm going to post more content to help you get this, and we'll figure this out together. And until then, just remember, I love you all, and I'm an easy grader. Will we have a topic to write over next week? Yes, I will have the topic up before the end of this week so that you can start writing. I'm a social media influencer. Boy, that's a terrible thing, isn't it? Shouldn't be allowed to have influence on anybody. Um, Heavens to Bexy. Me with influence? No, thank you, sir. All right. No, thank you, evil. All right. That'll be my catchphrase as a superhero. No, thank you, evil. All right. Have a good day, everyone. Be well. Take care. I'm sorry none of the cats showed up. And any last thoughts from Kimmy? No? No last thoughts from Kimmy? Kimmy gave me a look like she wanted to murder me, which is fair. Uh, See ya and thank you again. Exactly. See ya and thank you again. Take care, guys. I'm done. Bye. Yes, end stream. What do you?